Here we are, folks. Christmas Eve. Can you believe it? And we're just in pre-show mode for a second. Great to see everybody on tonight. I wasn't quite sure how many people would turn up, but my suspicion is quite a few people will be watching this show in replay. Good news is Tony's queued up ready to come in just a second. And we'll have a really interesting conversation tonight about last year, this year, next year, what's going to happen. Who knows? It's certainly been a bumpy ride for many. And I think that 2025 will also be quite a bumpy, but we'll hopefully have a bit of fun on the way through as well. Anyway, just before I bring the show to a formal start, the dogs are here, of course. They've been out for their walk this morning. It was very misty, but very warm. We're looking as though we're going to have one of the warmest Christmas Eves in the UK. forever. So that's quite interesting. And of course, here's the studio. There's Tony queued up, ready to come over there. And we've got everything else sorted out. So it's all sort of happened. So I had a little bit of fun the other day. I was recording with, who was it? Can't remember. Oh, avid commentator, of course, Tarek. And I pressed a few buttons and suddenly everything stopped. And I discovered that the dogs had knocked the power socket out of the wall. There'd been a game. So we had to do a reset and a restart. But the good news is I've now taped it to the wall, so it won't come out again. And the dogs are a bit quieter. Anyway, I think we're good to go. So we will get the pre-show off. And then I'm going to start the show formally. And I'll be back in just a second. Hello there, welcome and good evening. It's Martin North here from Digital Finance Analytics on the 24th of December 2024. Can you believe it? What's happened to this year? And now we've got Christmas ahead of us and then the new year. Unbelievable. And the good news is Tony Locantro is teed up ready to come in. Just before I bring him in, let me just remind you, as I always do on these shows, that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice. It's a general conversation only. We moderate the chat, but feel free to throw your questions and comments in. Won't necessarily follow all the threads, but I quite enjoy watching some of the conversations going on. If you would like to ask a question of Tony or myself, if you use @WalkTheWorld, that'll get your question into my other queue, and that means that I'm going to see it. And I've also enabled Super Chat, which means if you want to get your question to the top of the list, or indeed make contribution to what we do around here, you can use Super Chat to do that. Always greatly appreciated. And we don't do this for profit. We do this because we think there's a really important conversation to be had. Let me bring Tony straight in. Tony, welcome. Good to see you once again.
Oh, great to be back on Christmas Eve. I think this is our second one, maybe.
Yeah, we've done a couple of these. I mean, we had a good fun last year. Now you've had a game of paddle today in the warm heat of Perth, so I hope you've cooled down sufficiently.
Yeah, I've got the slides prepared earlier. Plenty of time to cool down, and it was interesting that my wife-to-be said it's weird in Perth wearing a jumper in November, then suddenly we get smashed with 43-degree days. And I think that's how quickly trends can change and things can turn when you least expect it. And also wanted to add, I just got back from a holiday. I went to Hanoi and Siem Reap. And I must say that I found Hanoi to be, it was just the most polluted city on earth when we were there. I found it chaotic. One good thing about the trip was the coffee. Vietnam's amazing. I just thought it was a bit of a hassle. I didn't like being bussed up to a pearl farm and expected to buy pearls on the Ha Long Bay tour. I did really like the vibe of Siem Reap. When you fly in there, they've got a brand new airport funded by the Chinese. It's only a year old. I just like the vibe of that place. Really poor country, great people. But as you get older, I've got a saying that, the real thrill of a holiday is actually in the planning, researching, and booking more so than the actual holiday. So I think I'm all templed out. I don't need any more historical shit. But I think you've got to get out there and travel the world. And I think when you're young, a lot of your experiences are governed by who you pick up at night and how much piss you sink. But if you want to go to Siem Reap, 50-cent beers, take lots of US dollars and go for your life. But yeah, it was just a good holiday. I've had a few this year. Probably the highlight for me was Koh Samui. That'll get destroyed when White Lotus comes again. But for me, a holiday is all about what's going on inside yourself mentally and physically. So anyway, glad to be back at it. Good to see some people on the call. It's one of those tough ones, but again, I'll post this everywhere, so be plenty of replays. But thanks again for the opportunity, Martin.
No, always welcome, Tony. And it's interesting. I had a project years ago when I was consulting in Australia, and it was to do with working with about 14 airlines across the whole of Asia Pacific. And so for about 6 months, I traveled to each of the major centers, from Singapore, Hong Kong, and some of the other Asian. So I was able to visit, I don't know, 16 or 17 different locations across Asia. And the thing that amazes me, and I always come back to this, how diverse Asia is. People always think of it as just sort of a monolithic block, but actually every country has its own characteristics and its good points and its bad points. And one of the things I always took away from that project, which was a 6 to 9 month project, a very, very busy project, was just the diversity and different ways of thinking, different behaviors in different countries. So Malaysia was very different from Singapore, which was different from Japan. Just amazing, really. Right on the doorstep of Australia, you've got all those opportunities. But I have to say also, there are some downsides too with all traveling.
Oh, absolutely. And my first downside was that Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet websites didn't allow me to, they didn't ask for a middle name. So stupid me doesn't put it in. And then I almost missed the flight. But it's good to see that those airlines have got their shit together and put something in for your middle name. So, but I wasn't the only one. But yeah, I guess when you're living, and I'm thinking about people traveling from Asia coming to Australia, and all they're going to talk about is the affordability. Yeah, Perth's beautiful. Sydney, best harbour in the world, but just the expense and what they're getting for their value. And I just think that that's absolutely criminal as to what's going on. And if you look at the cost of living, for Australians, there's no reason why you wouldn't go to Bali or Thailand to retire, even Portugal, rather than retiring in what's turning into a hellhole here in Australia, where I guess, look, I'm going to say it again, we're being absolutely sandpapered to death here, and we get the joke now. I think the public of Australia gets the joke. So, no, good to be back. Good to be. Let's make some calls. Let's call it how it is. I'm happy to go out in a bit of a limb. I know it's tough picking things. You wouldn't want to pick interest rates. You wouldn't pick anything to do with that. But anyway, I'm going to give it my best shot, Martin. So.
No, excellent. And just to say that Cookie Boy posted, it's 6+ years since we did our first interview. I remember that, so the time whizzes by. So that's pretty amazing. And also Brad threw this question in, what's happened to the share market? People are calling it a bubble. However, the bubble hasn't burst. Will it burst? Merry Christmas to you and me. And just on that, it's worth just sort of putting up this. This is the ASX 200, which of course has been bubbling higher, although not necessarily as high as the US markets, but it's dropped back considerably in the last few days, thanks perhaps to the Federal Reserve commentary about, maybe we won't cut quite as far as we thought we were going to cut. So it's an interesting time to be talking about the markets and what's going on. I think it's also important to get a bit of balance here too, in terms of, life's important. What's life about? It isn't just about making money on the stock exchange or losing money on the stock exchange, right? There's a broader set of agendas. And I know, Tony, the other day, you and I made a show about your, diet and your change of lifestyle and how that's been a major positive impact. And I think it's important to get a bit of balance here in this conversation too. So hopefully we can do that. But and looking forward to it. Do you want to sort of lead off, and I'll let you drive the show?
Yeah, let's just go for it.
Okay.
Let's share. Am I sharing?
Yep, all good.
So I just click and move on.
You can just click and move on. Yep.
Oh well, I've actually had some fun playing with Grok, and I asked for a picture of me tiptoeing through the tulips today, and that's what it's created for me. Obviously, it got mixed up with the different types of paddle. At least I'm carrying meat. And I look probably more like Vin Diesel than myself there. But look, I'm not here to tiptoe through the tulips, people. I've had just as big a gutful of what we're going through as all of you. And let's just get on with it. So the all-important disclaimer, basically that covers my ass. It allows me to tell it how it is. The information is true and correct as I spit it out. Do not consider any of this to be personal advice. It's only general advice or just general information. But do you just be aware of that disclaimer. And this is how I think the world has gone, people. It's just gone absolutely crazy. If you get off social media, if you switch everything off and just go out, life really hasn't changed that much. But I think with your kids scrolling, with all the garbage on TV and social media, I think the world has certainly gone that way. And again, one of the funniest scenes in Hollywood. So I'm going to do a quick recap of 2024. And it was all dominated by Hook Tour. She ended up getting trumped, obviously, a couple of assassination attempts. Probably one of the biggest upset comebacks since Leicester City, in my opinion, when they won the Premier League. But anyway, so we've got all that to look forward to, and that's certainly coming up. But both those events certainly blew up the internet, blew up social media. Unfortunately, Trump's a terrible dancer. And then it came to this. Luigi Mangione, who gunned down the healthcare CEO. There he is, smiling in that photo. People are arguing who the hell he was. Ended up getting picked off in a McDonald's store by someone who recognised his eyebrows of all things. And then in a typical American fashion, this guy's probably got more marriage requests than anyone on earth because he's got a six-pack, and they call him attractive. So the women of America all want to marry this guy now. Bit of a hero to many, but I think that shook the world. How he did it, how blatant he was, and how silly he was to get caught. So if things couldn't get any more batshit crazy, Hook Tour, she was on her way to becoming the next Joe Rogan. Her podcast was climbing up the charts. She was selling merch, all for a lucky moment on a sexual act. So she decides to go into crypto. It was the biggest rug pull ever seen, and the last thing she heard really was she says, "I'm going to bed. I'm tired." And she's just made a lawyer-written statement. Not to be outdone, Luigi there had his own coin, and when I put these slides together, that coin was up 74.5% on the day. So, yeah, the world is just, I can't believe we're seeing all this stuff, guys, and aliens and future economic students are going to take the piss. If society just couldn't go downhill in the gutter anymore, then we have Bonnie Blue. Bonnie Blue is famous for calling up barely legal men to film having sexual activity with. And on the right, we have Lily Phillips. She's going for the world record to sleep with 1,000 men in 24 hours. She had a trial run. She slept with 100 men and she regretted it, and she looked rather depressed. So society has certainly turned into a cesspit. In the old days, you would have had to have gone missing for a week with no food to sell your story to New Idea, been in an abusive relationship, had life's troubles. But now I think with the proliferation of OnlyFans and it's just absolutely degraded society. I don't know what people think of this, but I actually think it's disgusting. But Australia had their own. We have to be proud of her. I think the look on those judges' faces says it all. She was in the press recently trying to get 10 grand legal fee out of someone that wanted to write a musical on her. But yeah, 2024, what a batshit crazy year. And I want to hit Control Alt Delete on it, to be honest. It'd be great if you could just, as I said, switch off, get away from it all, get away from the all the bloody noise. But I think the key theme for us in Australia is where we're getting sandpaper to death, and this cuts through the cost of all our food, energy bills. Yeah, try renewing your insurance and getting anything that's competitive these days. Good luck if you've had a speeding fine in the last 3 years or an at-fault accident. You're going to get absolutely slugged with your insurance. Again, you're going to have to put in some effort to renew it. The days of the 2.64% 5-year fixed loans, there's only a couple of years left on them. But rising mortgage costs, fuel costs, we're just being absolutely sandpapered to death. And the key point is that they're expecting retail sales to break records. And my message is, I'm now 53, and honestly, to hell with consumerism. There are much cheaper ways out there to get dopamine. There's much better ways, to spend money on people you care about rather than buying something they're just going to exchange anyway. I've learned that you can have stylish products that don't cost the earth. I'm happy to be shopping at Temu. I get plenty of compliments on my $17 watch. And now what I've noticed is my cost per wow ratio is 1, meaning that for every time someone says wow, it goes off the ratio. So if you spend $1 million on a car, to get that ratio to 1, you need 1 million people to say wow. So anyway, we're absolutely copying it all over the place. It's worse than sandpapering. It's sandpapering whilst listening to a politician in your ear, and I don't see any relief next year whatsoever. So I'm happy now to call that the Australian economy is about to get the fork in the roast chicken. I think that we've been cooked for some time now, but at some point you have to call it, because even if we're lucky to get 25, 50 basis points of relief next year, I can't see any pressure coming off the cost of living. I think a lot of the public out there are just going to be skipping the dentist. Nothing worse than walking around with a toothache. People are going to start scringing on their private health insurance. They're going to stop getting their glasses updated. And again, it gets down to a case of health and mental well-being. But this is an absolute joke, what's happening now in the economy. And I think this chart, again, is going to show a lot of the lunacy we're faced with. And things were going okay towards that 2020 correction. And then we ended up with COVID, and interest rates cut to virtually nothing. We had all those 1.99% 2-year fixed loans come in, 5-year fixed were cheap, and the housing market just kept going on its merry way. If you look at an average income, say even of, let's be generous and say $100,000 per annum, the price to income ratio of Sydney now is about 15 times. And as you can see there, between 1972 and about 2000, there wasn't real much in the way of real price growth there. So my call is that the rot has certainly started. There are no drivers really, even if interest rates, as I said, come off 25, 50 basis points. I think that's more than factored in. And this chart, this diagram also from Spackers Australia, what a great website that is, shows that the Sunshine Coast is the most expensive place to live in Australia. I've actually I've lived on the Sunshine Coast. I did about a year in the police up in Gympie. I was living in Alexandra Headland. This was in the mid-90s. Also had a stint living on the Sunshine Coast in the early 90s, and that area was pretty rough. It was almost as rough as in my old surfy days, getting around freshwater and curl. So that area has just gone absolute gangbusters. You'll see a lot of people complaining about how much of a wankfest Noosa is turning into. But I guess when you've got the privilege going up there on holidays, all the stars want to be there. It's kind of like a trendy Byron Bay. Sydney in second place. Then you even look towards the Gold Coast, Wollongong, Newcastle, Canberra. Even there, somewhere nowhere near a beach is high up. Even Geelong has got a much higher median price than Perth. But I still think Perth in 17th place at 779,000 is still historically expensive. I know we've had a 25% increase this year. A lot of that, though, it's been of the areas such as Camillo, Kelmscott, Armidale, places where you probably don't feel as safe. You probably got closer access to meth and other drugs, chance of a burglary, but they've seen increases 40, 50% per annum over the last couple of years. So Perth has really motored off an extremely low base. And it is a beautiful place to live. Probably not so much fun for tourists. But the way I see it is that if we still get a bit of speculative inflow, a lot of residents from the east, a lot of foreign money still coming in, there's probably some upside still to be had. But I guess that rate of growth is certainly going to slow. But no real shock to see Perth the star performer in Australian property. You can look down that list. A few other places you might find attractive. I think in the first real run, Hobart was a bit of a lobster pot, easy to get into, impossible to get out of. So I can see all those figures, maybe with the odd exception, coming right off. The real major cracks, I think, have been in Melbourne. I can only see that getting worse, and similar for Sydney. So I guess we've got a question. What is going to be a realistic price to income ratio? I know when I was growing up in the early 70s, my father was able to buy a nice unit in Manly Vale for about 4 times his income. Mum under no real pressure to work, so we could pretty much live near the golf course there. And one of my first experiences, actually the first property I bought, was in North Bondi. I bought a 1-bedroom unit. I paid $115,000 for it. It was roughly 2.4 times because I was working at Bondi Police Station. Then that same unit now would be trading at $1.2 million, or even on 100 grand income, 12 times for a shitty 1-bedroom unit. Admittedly, it was close to the beach, but now you've got like a Chemist Warehouse on Bondi Beach just to add to the total vibe there. So yeah, it's been a hell of a year to be honest. We're still seeing, rampant growth in Perth, other major capitals slowing up, cost of living. We're all being sandpapered, strangled to death, and I just think now, the fork's in the roast chicken. So moving forward, how are we going to make some money? Well, if anyone, when Bitcoin was trading at $1, would say it'd go over 100,000, you'd think they're crazy. I didn't hear any calls such as that. To hold these assets, you would have had to have been in a coma or in prison without Wi-Fi. But let's be realistic. We're not going to talk about any altcoins, shit coins, hawk coins, Luigi coins. Let's talk about my favorite commodity / precious metal. And I think the real upside is in silver. I think now it's probably below $30 an ounce when gold's over 2,600. And I think the gold silver ratio has to sort itself out. I remember times quite vividly when Warren Buffett sold all his silver under $5 an ounce. He was citing concerns that digital photography would take away the demand from Kodak. Just before my father passed away, he spoke to me about his encounters with Bunker Hunt, who tried to unsuccessfully corner the silver market. He sent the price of silver to the moon, but unfortunately he ended up having to sell well over 900 racehorses when he did that. And I think you can see a lot of markets that are very tightly held and can easily go in a northeasterly direction. And I think that anyone that's been disciplined and has been stacking silver, buying depository receipts or the physical, I think is going to do exceptionally well over the coming years. And if you think that all these absolute garbage coins can have astronomical returns, what will actually happen if the silver squeeze movement gets onto it? So yeah, silver. Anyway, if anyone's got gold, that's not a bad place to be, but I think gold's really outperformed. I'm a contrarian by nature. Being a contrarian means that for a lot of the time, I'm going to be wrong. A lot of the time, my clients are going to be underwater. We like, pardon me, we like buying assets that others don't. Sometimes we get in far too early, and sometimes we have to go through tough markets. But in 2025, I've got some really high hopes for some companies. I know that most on this channel are a property crowd into other financial investments, but I'm going to show some stocks that have what I believe to be the perfect risk reward, kind of like a starter pack. If you're looking into speculation, I've got no major companies to recommend because they're all overpriced to the shithouse, and you only have to look at our banking sector and Commonwealth Bank in particular, that's trading like a growth stock, similar to what Woolworths was before it hit the fan. So I don't have any interest in major stocks. I look for companies that are grossly undervalued. Let's call them the red-headed stepchildren of the investment world. So anyway, here goes, people. So some of you would have heard of these stocks before. Yeah, sometimes good things take time. To steal a line from Wall Street. My stock of the year for 2025 is a company, Red Metal. My relationship with this company is just as long as my 2 failed marriages. They've been listed for 23 years. A lot of people say that the stock does sweet bugger all, but it actually has some very decent trading ranges, and you can make 500 to 700% if you buy it at the right time. So what do I like about this stock? They have found 4.795 billion tons of iron ore. Oh, sorry. First mistake of the night. It's 4.795 billion tons of rare earths, 20 kilometers from Mount Isa. Pardon me. And it's ginormous. And I think that the key is the location. Mount Isa is obviously going to struggle with copper smelters being closed down. They also hold 44% of the next company that I'm going to mention, which have arguably Australia's best undeveloped silver deposit. In Australia, it's an absolute doozy. The other good thing about Red Metal is they have an alliance with BHP. There's going to be some big exploration programs. Only one drill hole there could really change the color of your day. I like to call it a crunchy stock for the boomers amongst us. But from 10 cents, they've just raised money at 10 cents. They got $6 million from shareholders. That's obviously put some pressure on it. They do have 23 years of being listed. Fantastic management, well undervalued on assets. And I think this thing can go multiples. And it's the type of stock where you can sleep at night. So my stock of the year for 2025, hopefully I haven't jinxed them, is Red Metal. Maronan, I was instrumental in the IPO of this company, has been as high as 39 cents in its life. Pardon me. They have a major silver, lead, copper, gold deposit near Cloncurry, two 30 million tonne resources next to each other. It starts shallow from the surface. It's had lots of publicity on the likes of Stockhead, where Christy Batten said, this looks like a mine. They've just had a research report released by GBA that put a 95-cent valuation on them. Why the share price weakness? They again raised quite a bit of money at 24 cents. When stocks fall below the capital raised price, they tend to come under pressure. When silver went back below $30 an ounce, more selling pressure. But I think these guys are an absolute sitting duck for a major that one day might work out what that Maronan deposit is worth. So another one with great management. They actually share some management with Red Metal. And I think if you're really after a stock that's going to benefit from silver, that's the one, Maronan. Saturn Metals fits the perfect profile of what a gold growth stock should be. I've watched plenty of gold stocks in my career. I was one of the early backers of Northern Star at 5 cents, where I helped them to raise the money. I think they got up to about $18. But again, you would have had to have been in a coma or in jail to have ridden it that far. This reminds me of a mini Capricorn. Charlie, Mike, for those to do some research. Capricorn's gone from 40 cents to into the stratosphere. But what has hurt Saturn recently has been the unfortunate death of a drilling contractor. WorkSafe are currently investigating, and unfortunately the company has had to cease operations and has been very quiet. So there has been some selling pressure in Saturn. Very unfortunate death. You don't wish anything to happen to a company. But I think once we get through this phase, I think the growth prospects there are amazing. And the good thing is, arguably, they're going to have over 2 million ounces in the one blob. And if that doesn't make them a corporate target, I don't know what is. So again, lowish downside, moderate to high upside. These are the types of companies that I'm not picking shitty stocks. These have got assets supporting them. They've got 400, 500, 1,000% upside potential, but you've got to be patient. They're not going to give you that dopamine hit that the sports bet app can give you, or porn. If you want similar dopamine in a cheaper way, take up paddle as to what I do. So Saturn Metals, great growth stock. Hopefully we can move forward from that unfortunate incident. My next one, Talisman Mining. Great history, this company, great management. Kerry Hermanis He owns 36 million shares in Talisman Mining. Kerry was behind the rise of Jubilee Mines from about 17 cents to a takeover at $3.1 billion. He's one of the fittest looking mid-70s dudes I've ever met. He pulled me aside at a mining conference recently and said, Tony, I don't have to tell you to buy my stock. Now, why I really like this stock is that they've got a iron ore royalty from MinRes that has the potential to go for another few years, maybe even more. That's returning $4 to $8 million per annum. That gives the stock a PE ratio of 5 to 7 times. But what they're doing with that money from the mining iron ore royalty is drilling for absolute monsters in New South Wales and South Australia. So you've got high risk, high reward exploration underpinned by the royalty, underpinned by a major shareholder in Kerry Manus who isn't there for a picnic. So a great company, trading not far off its lows. I'm not going to suggest anything, any stock to anyone that's already had a massive run. So Talisman, Far East Gold. I was heavily involved in the IPO. It went from 20 cents to 73. It's back to 17.5 cents. They now have a major Chinese investor in the silver sector called Jingxi. They're in there at 20 cents. They have picked up a gold project called Eidenberg in Indonesia that has a 7 million ounce exploration target at a handy grade. They have multiple company making projects. Their main project, Woyla, caused the run to about 73 cents. Those drilling results did not live up to the lofty expectations, and the stock obviously has come back hard. Justin Werner is worth researching. He's heavily involved in a company in Indonesia called Nickel Mines. Code is Nickel Industries, NIC. And these guys have the potential to get it done in Indonesia. So I think there's multiple company making projects in that company, and you're getting in below the price of the Chinese. So a great story there, and hopefully a bit of a recovery. But again, it's got great risk reward. Now, the biotech sector over the last 3 years has been a disaster. It's the worst environment for biotech investing I've ever seen. We've copped it all over the place. We've just copped selling from everywhere. A lot of biotech companies have been forced to raise capital at prices you wouldn't dream about, and it's been a crisis of confidence. But if I had to pick one biotech, it's PIQ. It's probably a more solid biotech in the fact that they've developed a pro-marker D blood test that picks up diabetic kidney disease years before it happens. The company had a great run. They had an alliance with Sonic Healthcare in the US. Sonic in the US did not deliver. Proteomics ceased the contract. The shares got absolutely smashed, but they're going to look for other ways to get their pro-marker D test out into the market. So looking forward to news on that early next year. They also have a simple test for endometriosis. Endometriosis affects 1 in 9 women and can take up to 8 years to diagnose, made more popular by Bindi Irwin and other sufferers. They also have a test for esophageal cancer, which is often leads from acid reflux. Now that test is providing results 90 to 94%. So we're not reliant on a binary outcome on drug trials. It's not similar to an oil company drilling and having a dry well. This is going to come from getting revenue from these tests, all 3 tests that are could be quite valuable, and the share price, as you can see, is not far off its more recent lows. So yeah, proteomics one to watch. Now, the dream story of this year's Melbourne Cup, Robbie Dolan on 90 to 100 to 1 horse Knight's Choice. Robbie was actually on The Voice and got into the finals actually, and he managed to get that horse to the line. I know most in the crowd and punters would have been pissed, but it was actually a bloody good ride. And wouldn't we like to back 100 to 1 winner? Well, anyway, I'm going to give you one because why the hell not? I've given some solid companies, great risk reward. Now let's give you the long shot. Everest Metals. So Everest trading at 13.5 cents. Just recently did a large capital raising at 11. So there's probably a little bit of digestion to get through, but it seems to be holding quite well. Everest, run by Mark Caruso, who was prominent in growing allied mining and processing. He was also a very early investor in Fortescue. And Mark said to me, I'll never forget this saying. He said, "You mightn't know me, but you'll never forget me." And from my online meeting with him, that's certainly the case. But he's a real hands-on guy. They've got the Revere Gold Project. They've just put a small plant on there. They're going to try and drill out a major gold reef system in WA in 2025. They've also got some other gold that they could hopefully throw through someone else's mill and get some revenue. Now, the real cheesecake with Everest is they do have a rubidium deposit. It's an exotic metal that ends in IUM, and the rubidium market is tiny. It's actually less than 2 tons a year on a global basis, but it is a supply constraint story. So if they can extract it, development, hopefully there's going to be a market for it, and that's used in military applications, and it may replace cesium. So again, it's a bit of a long shot because we are exploring for gold, but we also had, as I mentioned, rubidium that no one really knows about. Similar situation to niobium, where WA1 went from pretty much 12, 15 cents to over $20 when they made a niobium discovery in WA. So that's my 100 to 1 long shot. I think everyone has to be mindful that regardless of the economic shitstorm ahead, that there's a never-ending flow of dumb money. And we've seen that, unfortunately, into people going into scams, getting rug pulled on the Hawk Tour coin, where many have claimed to have put their life savings into, those that are punted on these other celebrity coins and have steered clear of more traditional investments. But the good thing is that regardless of the economic underlying conditions in Australia, that the human stupidity is infinite. Great. We've got over 2,000 views of this. I've laid it out. I've laid out how I've turned my life around. Coming up to 2 years without a drink. I miss alcohol as much as I miss Red Bull, and I've never bought a Red Bull in my life. I'm not going to touch it. Got no interest in any peer group pressure. All the signs now are saying it's seed oils that have caused the obesity epidemic. If there's one thing you take away from this discussion is stop cooking with vegetable oils and your life will turn around. So anyway, I've happily carnivore, no alcohol, no sugar. I will say that that my one vice when I go away is I will indulge in a fresh coconut, which does have a lot of healthy fats. So again, this year, and I now have a new saying, guys. And it's not the old three S's, which were steak, sex, and Shiraz. We now have the P's, which are paddle, Perrier, prawns, porterhouse, and my Christmas lunch choice, pork belly. And guys, it is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. It rates off the charts with the health benefits. Eat it, eat pork belly till your nose bleeds. And of course, the other P is passion, i.e. Getting it on with a member of the opposite sex if you're that way inclined. So there are the new P's in my life. As I've said before, guys, paddle is the fastest growing sport in the world. Once you start playing, you'll end up like me and be an addict. Great for cardio, great for dopamine, great for hand-eye, and great for being social. I was actually playing with a guy a couple of weeks ago. Halfway through the match, he turned to me and said, "Are you that stock guy? I've been following you for years." So anyway, get on with the P's and a beer. That's all, folks. Take me off share, Martin.
Excellent, Tony. Thank you very much indeed. And as always, some provocative thoughts there. Of course, in the chat, there was a range of reactions, as you would expect. Not a problem there. And I just wanted to sort of contextualize what you've said, because, I think 2025 is going to be a difficult year for many people. And it's worth just reflecting on what happened overnight when the IMF basically came out and said that the inflation question is still very much on the table, and they were suggesting the RBA may have to lift rates rather than cut rates because of the fact that the government spending had been stoking the economy. And of course, if you compare the inflation rate in Australia and the US, you can see Australia's significantly higher and going in the wrong direction compared with the US. And of course, we have massive amounts of state and federal government spending going on at the moment. So that's the sort of the first angle. And the second angle is that the Reserve Bank came out with their minutes and, the long list of people who were attending there. But what I thought was interesting was that they were talking about the fact that the rates were currently restrictive. And they basically left every option on the table from going up, going down, going sideways. So you can't, I think, bank on a rate cut early in the year, and maybe even later in the year is going to be a question, given what we're seeing with government spending and with the election and everything else. So that's going to put ever more pressure on people. And, I come back to this simple perspective, which is that the environment that we've actually created in Australia is very toxic for many people. And therefore, it's really tough to try and sort of find a way through. More reports have come out with more people in stress, more people having to sell property, all those sorts of things. And I want to come back to the markets insofar that, of course, the markets were quite high, but then actually wobbled strongly, particularly when the Fed said, well, maybe we'll only lift rates lower by 2 next year rather than 4. And there's a certain amount of uncertainty globally. We have Trump. And Cookie actually asked a question earlier on about Trump and how Trump is, rattling the cages. The truth is, of course, that we don't quite know how this is going to all play out. We don't know quite what Trump is going to do. But the question is probably that we're going to see tariffs or threat of tariffs. We've got a very strong US dollar at the moment, which is putting downward pressure on the Aussie dollar in terms of the strength of the dollar, the Aussie dollar. And so, again, more uncertainty. And I guess as we come into next year, this uncertainty mantra seems to me to be right on the table, which means you've got to sort of make some decisions. You can't expect the government to bail you out. You can't expect the Reserve Bank to bail you out. So it's going to be down to making good decisions personally, I think.
Well, it gets back to the ugliest word in economics, and that word's stagflation. And that's what we're living through. You can fudge the numbers as much as you want. That stagflation in the 70s was one of the ugliest economic periods of all time, and that's what we've got. It's simply called an inflationary recession, and if you look at per capita, we're knees deep in it, just like our friends over the ditch and that other decaying similar Commonwealth country in Canada. So, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, we're certainly going to all be on the podium. And I make my point is that families are going to lose the fight. This is wearing a lot of people down. It's as if I've got no doubts that some women are saying, well, look, I'll set up an OnlyFans account. I mean, the time to do that was before everyone else. There's no real opportunities out there for people to make a lot of money to get them out of the shit. And without any relief on the cards, I think people are going to have to suck it up. Have a different lifestyle. Don't feel obliged to buy your kids new shit all the time. You don't have to pay for their cars. Kids do not need their own bloody bedrooms and a backyard where they'll never go out to. If you're in any hint, if you're looking like your situation is dire, get the fuck out before everyone else does. It's a tough decision to sell. I know that a lot of families are saying, well, look, I've got to get my stamp duty back. One of the worst things you can do is go for the break-even sale and then become despondent once prices start falling. And I think that we're way over leveraged. We've lived well beyond our means. How is the world better when instead of paying 4 times income for a property, you're forced to pay 16 times for a knockdown asbestos-riddled shitbox 60 k's from the city? Life hasn't gotten that better at all. And families, you just got to, I know it's tough out there. You got to have a good night's sleep. You can't make any decisions without a decent night's sleep. And if you're always tired, struggling, suffering mentally, this is going to just engulf you. And I think it's going to engulf a lot of people, Martin. And financial stress leads to health problems because we're all going to neglect getting basic treatment. It's going to lead to domestic violence. It's going to lead to increased suicide rates, loneliness, deep-seated depression, you name it. It's an absolute fucking shit show. And unless you sell, go and spend time with relatives you don't like, suck it up. I think some tough decisions are going to be made, and very few have the ability to go out and work harder, to pull a greater income, even though nurses, police, fireys are all getting wage increases. It's not keeping up. So I can't see anything positive to come out of next year at all, unless you can get your balance sheet together. As I said, 20, 25 basis points is like a drop of water onto a raging inferno. Anyway, that's my view, Martin, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
Well, it's certainly, I see it in my surveys with the stress levels very high, rental stress as well as mortgage stress. And it's interesting, I've had a few conversations over the last couple of weeks with people who are wondering now whether Australia is actually a place to call home or not, or whether there are actually better options. And, there are some people who are looking at Asia where you can retire much cheaper up in Asia. Other people looking at other options too, because the other theme that comes through in all of this is the inability of the political class in Australia, either one wing or the other wing of the same bird, to really tackle the fundamental issues that they should be tackling. They're sort of focusing on stuff over there or over there, nuclear or whatever, which might be important, but really is not critical. And at the moment, a lot of people are just shaking their heads saying, we don't know quite where we've gone. And certainly compared with where Australia was 20, 30 years ago, it's a bit of a basket case at the moment. And of course, the exchange rate isn't helping. So it is a very, very important time. And, maybe Christmas, New Year is a time for reflection and for people to sit down and really do some sums and work out what to do. Interestingly, quite a few people that I speak with haven't really done the math in terms of where they really are financially and, where they would go if they did plan A versus plan B. And I think sometimes thinking about alternative plans is a good thing to do. So that would be one thought. But the difficulty that I see is that we're not going to see a different trajectory next year. We're going to see a replay. We're going to have an election in the year. We might well get the other side of politics come back in, but that's really not going to change much. And interestingly, the latest on the migration is now that the more conservative side of politics have sort of pedaled back from saying, well, we should drop migration down. And that's, of course, a significant thought because, of course, the population is looking to be on track to hit 31.3 million. And that's essentially driven by strong net overseas migration, which is still running well ahead of where it used to. And interestingly, WA has the largest share of residents living in the capital and a very large share of those people coming in from overseas. So the WA factor is actually another pull factor at the moment for many people, which I find quite interesting, especially in the context of those house price charts that you shared a little while ago. So yeah, it is a bit messy. So time perhaps to think a little bit about what to do, and maybe there's time to zig rather than zag when everybody else is zagging rather than zigging. I don't know, but it just I think shows that there's obviously a limit on what some people can do, but I think at least open the question.
Certainly, and I guess we've been brought up. We're brought up as sheep, basically, to grow up, get a job, get married, have kids, get a massive mortgage, retire, then die. Unfortunately, financial constraints in Australia means that you certainly have to make some changes. And I don't blame people for looking to retire, or live in Bali, live in Thailand, even Portugal's highly rated as a place to retire. And I guess people are concerned about leaving their family. They were perhaps concerned about selling up out of Western Sydney for 2 million and buying 4 houses in Perth because they were scared they might miss their family who they hate anyway. So people don't really want to make massive changes, but unfortunately, that beautiful run-up we've had in property and financial assets means that now you actually have to do something. And I know the youth and a lot on social media are bagging out boomers. They've just had the greatest free carpet ride, free ride of all time, not through any fault of their own. They've been in a period where interest rates have gone from essentially 18% to 0.1%. They've had this massive growth in house prices, not through their fault. Now they really should be cashing it in. But I guess you might think, well, who wants to be, I'd rather be wealthy and that. But I think the most valuable asset the youth of today have is time and the ability to set your own path. But I just think with financial assets, the cost of living in Australia, the constant flow of Chinese money and overseas students with rich parents forcing the youth out of the housing market. Look, I don't have to buy perfume at the airport. You do not have to pay these ridiculous prices to live in East Broken Hill, for Christ's sake. You don't have to pay that. Just look at what sparks joy in your life, and I can certainly assure people it's not the ongoing throbbing headache. That's financial stress, because as I said, it's only going to get worse. And unfortunately, the Control Alt Delete is going to be the mother of all corrections, guys. There's no other way out of it. You're not going to get hyperinflation to inflate your way out of it. You're not going to get a miracle. You're not going to put $1 in fart coin and it turns into $1 million. No, there's no more miracles. You're just going to have to make some tough decisions. You're going to have to think outside of the box. You're going to have to look for other ways to ensure your family's financial security. And if that means selling and moving in with the in-laws and sitting it out for a couple of years, I just think people are going to have to do that. And it wasn't that long ago. We went through COVID. Look how long we were tied down, weren't allowed to do anything, had to wear masks, had to social distancing. Sometimes you just got to make decisions outside of your comfort zone. Say no, learn to say no to people. Who cares anyway? It's unfortunately we're here. There's no getting out of it. Look, there's no joy in me saying this, but you know, I go back where people said that interest rates will never rise in our lifetime. I mean, and look what's happened there. We're still 2% below the RBA's long-term average now, Martin. So I don't know how people are going to survive. I don't know. You know, you look at what's happening in society, all these tobacconists going up in flames. The black market, anyone that's buying full price cigarettes has to earn 200 grand a year to fucking live and then bloody smoke. No wonder the black market's going through the roof. There's going to be black markets in alcohol, vapes, you name it. People are going to go outside of government because we're just being taxed to the extreme. And once you do travel to cheaper countries, you think, what the hell am I doing here? Paying $15 for a muffin and a coffee. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any levers. You know, it'd be like trying to land an A380 with no landing gear, Martin.
Yeah, big bump. Yeah, and this is interesting because if you compare the costs of, I don't know, groceries in Australia compared with the UK, they are less than half as expensive here compared with Australia now. And it's quite interesting just looking at the differences. So, you know, the fact is that the Australian economy has led to unassailable costs of things. And the real incomes of people, of course, have not really grown, I think, due to bad policy and high migration, all of those things that we've touched on many times before. And, of course, the massively high home prices. It's a superficial feeling of wealth, right, because the number's gone up. But, of course, the number's gone up because the value of the dollar's gone down rather than anything else. And it's not real. And that's the point. And quite often when you actually talk to people who, when they do the math, they realize that actually what they thought was wealth was a bit illusory. Otto had an interesting question, and that was relating specifically to miners. Otto said, germanium and gallium, are there speculative miners looking for those two minerals? Any thoughts?
Yeah, some more that ends in IUM. And I think certainly worth researching. I know that when they did a story on 60 Minutes on rare earths, they were talking about those in particular and the military uses. I just don't think they haven't quite caught on as much as antimony, which has gone through the absolute roof and taken a lot of companies with it. So it's just a case of are they going to give that dopamine spike? But certainly if you're in that area, certainly might be worth a punt. But you know, you might have one or two quality companies looking at those commodities, but you know, you get a bit of a bubble, then suddenly there's 500. So my 100-to-1 long shot company is in rubidium, which is a market in desperate need of supply, which does have those military uses. So, I mean, you could punt on the periodic table all day and still get it wrong. But I know there's juniors that you'll start to see more announcements from them. So maybe keep them in the search engine of the likes of Hot Copper. be a good way of doing it. But I don't know any quality junior mining companies off the top of my head.
No, it's a bit of an interesting question because, of course, there are lots of different minerals, some of which could potentially be quite attractive. But again, the risk is, of course, quite high as well. Well, Tony, we're sort of coming up to the end of the show, and just before we close, any last thoughts? And your key recommendation for anybody trying to survive 2025, what would you say?
I think once the hangover has subsided and you've finished all the leftovers and you want to get back, actually open your mail, look at the bills you've got, look at a way of addressing it. And if you've been considering selling, unfortunately, it might already be too late, because I'm sure there's lots of other people that are thinking to get the hell out. I've provided some stocks to research. I think I think the small cap market in Australia has been undervalued for 3 years now, and I just can't see myself having 4 bad years in a row out of 27. So I'm looking for some multiple upside there. I'm looking for some 10, 20 baggers. I think one of the good things with my clients is next time something goes up 1,000%, they're going to be a little bit more aggressive with their selling. So my suggestions are sell to protect what you have. And when you do make a windfall profit, take it. Take the windfall profits, stay educated, keep above it, and just be a good person, as what I tell my kids and everyone that will listen. And I think the other main thing, Martin, is to look at your health, because once your health declines, you're pretty much cooked, just like the Australian economy.
Well, of course, costs of healthcare are one of the big inflationary pressures, so it's not good news. I guess my perspective would be for those people thinking about, what to do. Once you've had the Christmas celebrations, etc., it's worth sitting down and just understanding what your financial commitments are. A lot of people are still not very clear on the interest rates they're paying on various debts. And quite often, the right advice would be to look at how to deal with those debts and pay off some of those with higher interest rates first, and try and get yourself out of debt. Because the point is that debt is actually one of the big nooses around many people's necks at the moment. But I think your point from earlier on is also quite valid, that there is a point where the right decision is to do something more radical, and maybe actually even maybe sell the property that you've got, etc., rather than try and hang on, because I don't see any remarkable change in trajectory in the next few months to what's been happening, and therefore these stress levels will continue. And I want to come right back full circle, because high stress, be financial stress, can often fold into then physical stress, which then leads to physical problems and health issues. And so there is a very important sort of circular thing going on here between the financial world and the real world and the physical world, and thriving and surviving. And at the end of the day, as somebody said in the chat earlier on, do you work to live or do you live to work? And I think that's a really important question. I think many people at the moment feel that they're on the rat race, and really just trying to get through rather than thriving. So bit of perspective perhaps is a good thing to do at this time of year, Tony, and just ask what's really important.
Oh, 100%. And I hope everyone has a great Christmas Day tomorrow. Celebrate, start to feel good about what you do have. And I guess we've got to mourn what's happened to this amazing country that was Australia, growing up through the 70s, 80s and 90s, even the early 2000s was awesome. Stay above it. Keep supporting this amazing channel. And I look forward to coming back and telling people of the major success those companies I mentioned had. There you go. I'm gonna make that call right now.
Excellent, Tony. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful Christmas and New Year's yourself. Thank you very much for coming on Christmas Eve. And I'll look forward to picking up again with you in the new year. We'll always have time to chat further. So thank you very much. I'm going to take you offline now. I'm then going to close the show, and we'll obviously wish everybody a very peaceful Christmas in the meantime. Thank you, Tony. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Right, so that's it, folks. I hope you found that interesting, informative, and also a bit thought-provoking. Drew, you asked about Senator Rennick. I'm going to reach out for him early in the new year and hopefully get him to come on, maybe on the live stream in January or February, depending on his diary. He's doing a lot of great work at the moment, and I think that's very important to continue to support some of the independents, because I think the main side of politics, left and right, aren't really doing a good job for Australians at the moment. So we'll do what we can there, and more about that later. The dogs are, well, we've got half a dog. So at the moment, I've got one dog. That's Luna. Meteor is down by my feet. That's because she thinks it's lunchtime. In fact, there you go. You can just see her there. Well, she's right by my feet, but there you go. Wagging her tail. So there you go. So that's a Christmas wag from Meteor. And I want to say thank you very much for spending some time on this Christmas Eve. I hope you have a peaceful and satisfying Christmas and New Year. Just to say that there will be a couple of live shows over the next week. Next Monday at 8 p.m. Sydney, Edwin and I will be on to talk about Edwin's prospective thoughts for property in 2025. And then on Tuesday, which will be effectively the 30th, I've got Damien back on. Sorry, 31st, I should say. I think that is the last day of the year. Damien will be back on Tuesday to talk about the markets and what he sees next year as well. So those are the two live shows. And there will be a couple of other shows coming up, which will be recorded. But over the next few days, probably I'll be less productive than sometimes. But anyway, thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. Have a peaceful Christmas and New Year, and I'll look forward to seeing you very soon. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.